Hello, thank you for for joining us here. This is Brave New History. We're here again with Gnostic Quran.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
And if anybody's watching this live, it's Christmas and had a little bit of technical difficulties, so we're later than we normally start here, but we'll roll with it. So thank you for coming on, Gnostic Quran.
Yeah, it is just this influence of genes.
Yep.
We're delayed because of that, but yeah. And Christmas Eve, yeah, there is always gonna be a party poopers, this kind of people. Christmas is a shirk or something like that.
Yep.
It's
It's
all
true.
around. It's all around the Twitter.
Yep.
Even
Christmas
though
is church.
kissing the Blackstone is not the shirk for some reason, but Christmas surely is shirk.
Yeah. Well, that you mention it, David Wood, which I'm sure, he's all about the polemics, but he pointed out that there was some scholar back in the day that says anytime you say Allah, wa, something, it's shirk, right? Allah and something.
Oh, I didn't
But
know that.
but
Knowing how OCD the mullahs can be, it's not a big surprise. So, but as far as this idea that Christmas is shirk, it's a purely, it's there in the non-radical circles in Sunnism, in Asharism, and traditional Orthodoxy, but it's not shirk for the reason that you are like doing some pagan stuff. It's shirk just because it's already established that Jesus just simply a prophet in like the Sunni Orthodox understanding, and if you follow that, then it's more like a kufr, not a shirk, that you are
yeah,
rejecting Islam for the sake of Christianity. But to say that this is paganry, like it's almost like some sort of a Protestant
yeah,
arguments that circling around. It's definitely a Salafi thing,
yeah,
because they held exactly the same position for the Mawlid, or for the day of celebrating the birth of Muhammad, and it's like they transpose this type of argument on the Christianity. Like, if it's shirk in Islam when you are celebrating the birth of the Prophet, then it's shirk in Christianity too. But yeah,
yeah. That makes sense. Within that thought process.
yeah. But today we're not gonna discuss that, because I spent like last week or dedicated last week on the translation of the Surah Waqiyah,
Mhm.
often translated as the event. And we already discussed this particular surah before in the previous stream, about this kind of tripartite distinction of the humanity, that there is going to be companion of the lefts, companion of the rights, and this righteous one, or the nearest to God. But what I found out that and back at the day, I was only translating a little parts, when I just try to make a thought process about the whole stuff, the whole surah. There is, I would say, sometimes some sort of a mystical tradition of Judaism sinks in. And what I think when the Quran speaks about this Hurul Ain, or the virgin Huris, it's not actually even this kind of proposition of the Luxembourg, or what I upheld recently, that it's just borrowing from Manichaeanism, where you have this Diana's virginal spirit. But what most likely we are dealing with is the is the Merkava mysticism tradition, where in visionary experience you can see this, or as recently too was popularized as like this kind of biblically accurate angels, where they have the eyes everywhere around them. These kind of weird forms with the eyes on its surfaces. And like if you do translate literally, Hurun Ein, it basically means the white eyes or white-eyed one. And oftenly this word or word combination, Hurun Ein, if we look in other surahs, additioned with Muqasirat, and this word particularly stems from Qasara in Arabic, and Qasara in Arabic means the castle, and well, that's part of the I would say the Hekalat literature, when they have a vision of the so-called Hekalot, or the castles. And in my perspective, what Quran tried to say, that it is like some sort of a weird portrayal of these castles, which are gonna be like depicted with this weird eyes on them, on the surface of this castles. And yeah, it's one point I think I correct up in this last week. But when it comes to the, for example, conditionals, that's the big problem in like classical translation, because some of the conditionals just barely skipped. The structure of the sentences are chaotic, like just basically skipping the words, skipping this particles. And that's exactly why, for example, Christoph Luxemburg, because he wasn't only about the white grapes, one of his chapter was dedicated to the conditional in Arabics, and especially for the low condition, which usually used as the conditional particle for the hypothetical something hypothetical event, usually translated as if only, like low kuntum ta'lamun, if only you were knowledgeable, you will probably do that and that. And what he noticed, that when in the Quranic translation it used separately, like low, it translated exactly this way, if only, as optative particle, not as interrogative. But when the la is added, low la, suddenly it became interrogative in the traditional translation. And well, that's the problem, because that's basically how particle suddenly changes its meaning just with a following negation la, because la in Arabic just used for the negation. So the literal translation of falawla would be if only not. Like if the law means if only, then falawla would usually mean if only not, but this only in translation are skipped in most of the translation we have today. Just straight away translated if not, without only, where this at least the function of the particle of the optative one is changed to interrogative, even though you can easily in Arabic use limada, or limada would be the great, because it's used in the Quran extensively for the interrogation. And that's what Luxemburg points that out, and he was criticized heavily, but maybe he was criticized rightly when he just tried to like see everything in Syriac. Maybe that's the flaw when he tried to connect this particular grammatical construction with the Syriac. Here you can see the problem, because it's not well compared. I would say it's not a great comparison, but the thought process of Luxemburg is right when he bring up this argument. Why on earth the function of the particle changes in traditional translation? And as far as I know, there's no good critique. Like it's almost like a straw man. You're skipping the argument and pinpointing like this kind of little inconsistency in his critique in order to just discard the guy, like say, oh, he's just weirdo. But yeah, and that like I almost spent like 3 days trying to reconstruct it correctly. But I translated this almost half of the chapter, and I hope like next week or in the next 2 weeks I am gonna produce the full translation. And I think what I will do is like the translation without the commentaries will be free, and with the commentaries I will charge the price on my, I don't know, some, because well, a lot of work was dedicated to the etymology. That's pain in the ass to try to find cognates, and sometimes you won't find any cognates. Like for example, this word mandudin, which often translated as something like some sort of a laying down, usually used for the fruits. And if you will even try to find out something, and I'm not talking about the other Semitic languages, I'm talking what modern scholars decide to be a Paleo-Arabic, like Safayitic, you won't find anything like that. And we have, thanks for the help of the researchers in this field or archaeologists like Ahmed Al-Jalad, we have a lot of material about this Paleo-Arabic scripts. You won't find anything. That's the problem. So basically, what is the main problem? That what we have when it comes to this kind of, and this word appears only once in the Quran. That's another, like another layer of the problem. But when it comes to this kind of words which appears only once, what you have left is just to agree with the later generation of scholars, which appears in the, for some reason, in the 8th and 10th century. And most of the times they like us just simply guessing. They every one of them have different interpretation, of course, when it comes to this rare words. And that's why there's the whole, I would say, the, how is it, specific type of literature in this early Abbasid period called the Gharibul Quran, like the weird words in the Quran. Well, if you're an Arab, why on earth it's weird for you? Like if the Quran is a clear Arabic, it wouldn't be weird for you. Why you even have such type of a literature in your tradition to begin with? Well, because they, like us, didn't know what the hell is that. That's the most probable explanation to this inconsistencies within different translation. And even today, if you open the modern ones, it's such indescribable madness when it comes to the translation. It's almost like everyone translate as he wishes. Like there is no even consistency in terms of the grammar, how the sentences are constructed. When the sentence in the past, suddenly in translation, it's in the present tense or in the future mood. Like what the hell is going on? But I can see that. Well, I can see why it's problematic in the English-speaking world because of the language barrier and even this kind of scholarly works done by the Nöldeke, like this kind of greatest Orientalist in the 19th, 20th century. They mostly based on the Abbasid understanding, on the Abbasid, I would say Abbasid semantics, how they came up with a specific etymological structure of the Arabic. But yeah, just a little rant, because as far as I know, the only good scholarly work in this field is what is called the foreign vocabulary in the Quran, at least in English, when they try to pick up some connection with other Semitic languages, which wouldn't be surprising because Arabic is the Semitic language with maybe some influence of the Persian sphere, but in a more in much more what I want to say is much more influenced by the Persian words comparing to Hebrew, for example. It's more like a case as we have with the Mandaic, where we have this kind of weird Semitic Persian mix, which, well, if we do agree with the recent scholarly critique of the early origins of Islam, that it may originate not in the Hijaz, not in the Saudi Arabia northern one, but maybe like in northern Jordan, in Syria, or in Mesopotamia, for example. It makes sense why language which was used in Mesopotamia, and by language I mean this language which presented in this Quranic materials we have, if it was from Mesopotamia, why it bears this Persianate flavor to it, like Mandeans, like the Mandean language, which is native Mesopotamian ones, because Mande community is from Mesopotamia, from Iraq, has the same paradigm basically for its language. And it's fascinating that many, for example, I would say literally tropes, or even the word combination we can find in the Quran resembles what we can find in Ginza. For example, the famous, at least the names of God, which usually you can find in the Quran, often combined together, Al-Aziz Al-Hakim, like Allahu Al-Aziz Al-Hakim. You can find the similar in the Ginza, where the God is called to be Aziza Hakima. It just maybe it's not the borrowing. Maybe we're dealing with some sort of a similar religious sphere, which were back in the day, and it was most probably some sort of a common language for describing the God in this particular region, geographical region. If we're truly dealing with the Mesopotamia, it wouldn't be mad to imagine that they would have the similar vocabulary in terms of describing the deity, like exactly like Christians have the similar vocabulary, like in some Roman sphere of influence. Like it would be similar, for example, how would they describe the Son as unbegotten, both in Roman provinces and in this kind of Judea, right? So yeah, that's one point of the comparison. Another one is the Shaitani regime, which is used in the Quran once, as far as I know, and this is mostly in Islamic tradition. This "A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim" is pronounced before your reading of the Quran started. Like it's mostly translated as "God defend me from the shaitan, from the Satan and regime." Usually translated as "pelted by the rocks," but that's not that clear, because I think that's mostly picked up, this kind of translation, in order to facilitate the specific ritualistic tradition you can find during the Hajj, during the Muslim pilgrimage, when there's like some sort of a pillars. There is 3 pillars in this region, and what this Haji people or the pilgrims do, they basically buy the rocks, and they are pricey one, and pelt these pillars, which almost some sort of a representation of this devil spirits. And I think why this translation imposed, in order to like make a business, basically, because you can simply sell rocks. Well, that's a good business plan. But if you do compare it in the other Semitic languages, often rajima is usually used for the excommunication, and it is exactly how it's used in, I think, in the most verses in the Quran itself, when the prophets, like biblical old prophets, they were scared that their audience would do this rajima to them. And usually it's translated, "Oh, I'm afraid that you're gonna stone me." But most likely what we're dealing with is, "I'm afraid that you're gonna excommunicate me. I'm afraid that you're gonna just throw me away out of the community," which back in the day was like almost a death sentence, right? And we can see this Shaitani regime in the Ginza, actually, where it's used as a stan regima, cursed. In my understanding, it bears the similar idea that the devil is just basically thrown from the heaven. That's why he's excommunicated, right? But oftenly in Ginza, you can see that they do actually translate it, at least like this kind of German and English scholars, as it's almost like, let me remember, something cursed by the specific word combination, like almost like some sort of occult meaning to it, that he's like I'm just trying to find a good word in English. He's almost like under some sort of a spell which chained him. It's weird, given the fact that Manteic tradition is often like a great example in this kind of occult studies as the occult religion, first and foremost. That's why it survived basically till this day, because of the strict because of maintaining strict and closed community without any influence or influence of outsiders. So they would just pretend that they're like common folks. Why it might be that they belief might for the commoners might be very shocking. Like the good comparison would be Yazidis, right? When they held this kind of absolutely shocking belief that the Satan is some sort of a good positive figure, which is not controversial comparing what we have in the Sufi tradition. But what I try to bring up, that when we are dealing with a translation, most time it's just straight away guessing when it comes to the traditional one, especially when words appears only once or twice in the Quran. It's no resemblance given to the other Semitic languages, like this word I used, mondudin. If you try to find out similarities in Hebrew, you won't find anything, like literally anything, unfortunately. But yeah, and then giving this kind of Ginza parallels, right? That in the late Ginza chapters, as far as I know, even Muhammad is mentioned, but mostly scholars, they do agree that it was after the Islam because it's later parts of the Ginza, but still that's the fine comparison because as far as I know, in their tradition, it's always deemed like a spiritual being, this Muhammad, not like the actual prophetic figure. And when it even comes to the critique of Christianity from the Mandean standpoint, it's very weird because they never call him by the name, by the way, like Jesus figure. They just called Mashiach, some sort of a false messiah, right? But why would they pick up his name? That's weird. And maybe similar kind of stuff going on with the Muhammad and Ginza. Why they would just pick up him as a spiritual being? But actually, if we look upon some this kind of esoteric Shia traditions, and even the common Sufi ones, they held this idea that Muhammad, of the Muhammadan reality, what is called, or Nur Muhammadiyya, this kind of light of the Muhammad. And they actually do not perceive him as the human being in that sense. He is like the part of this, what is called the fivefold divinity nature, Ahlul Qisa, what is called in the Shiism, where the 5 members of the family of the Prophet, they are basically this some sort of a 5 divinity. It's a pentad of different spiritual traits, I would say. It's very similar to what we can find in the Gnostic tradition with the 5 trees in the heaven and in Manichaeanism. But as far as I know, there was like some sort of a development, this kind of 5-fold nature, because originally it was 4-fold, at least in Zoroastrianism. In Orthodox and non-Orthodox form, and Mani added one to it. That's, for example, Zurvanite cult, which were prevalent back in the day. They held idea that there was like a fourth essences of the divinities, and one of the essence was this Zurvan, this some sort of great time, as it's often translated, which would be identical to the Kalavada tradition in the Hinduism. And yeah, when I actually studied this surah Waqiya, it's mostly the god is always almost identified with a fate. When you read it, like there is like the passages in the surahs, like whether you created it or whether we created it, it doesn't matter. We already decreed death among you, and you can't outrun your death. So, and these passages are mistranslated, unfortunately. It's almost like the God questioning the audience. Like the passage starts like, "Do you not see what you emit?" And by emit, like it's like the light translation, the more literal. "Do you not see what you ejaculated?" Meaning the seed, and the seed was almost identified with a life, right? And what the surah tried to say, like, doesn't matter, like whether you are creator of the seed or we are creator of the seed, like it's already destined to die, my friend. Like, why don't you even care about these questions? And it has this strange fatalistic feeling to it, like it's almost came up from this Manichaean / Zurvanite circles, I guess, because Manichaean religion was a fatalistic one. They do not believe in the free will in the sense of how it was articulated in the Western tradition, and that's why, for example, the Saint Augustine, who was the ex-Manichae, he was criticizing the Manichaean faith exactly for this particular notion that they were fatalist. But I guess they just followed this prevalent mythology which was popular, but it's not even mythology. It was the way they think about the reality. It was almost like the science today, like the reality itself is this kind of ruled by this spiritual beings, and when you actually do something, it's not you doing this stuff, it's some either higher spiritual being acting through you or the lower one. And well, that's in a sense the denial of the free will, because you're not the actor. It's not actually you are who acting, but some sort of a, if it comes to the bad deeds, some sort of a flesh, which usually identified with a demonic spirit and Manichaeanism acting through you. It's not actually you. You are is this light trapped in this flesh. And when the good deeds happen to be radiated through you, through this light, it's not, don't even think that it is you who are acting. Don't be ignorant. It is this higher realms acting through you. And it's actually very similar to what we can find in Calvinism idea of the predestination. But yeah, and the problem is we don't have any material from the Zurvanites. That's the biggest problem. But when it comes to Manichaean tradition, the higher divinity was identified, at least not identified, but he was called Zurvan. When we read the Manichaean documents from Coptic tradition or from Turfan manuscript storage, which was found in the Turfan in China, in some Buddhist monastery, like it's quite evident that the Mani used the Zurvan as the name of this higher higher God, like God the Father, what is in Christianity, or Theos Agnostos, this undescribable God. And yeah, that's I found weird, because when you actually read the surah, you will have this exactly feeling that God almost identified with a time being, like it just doesn't matter what you do, you're gonna die. And there's already predestined Yom Din, this day of the judgment is often translated, but it's disputable, because the word is problematic in the sense that there is like the Semitic usage of the word and the Persian usage of the word, exactly the same word. And as far as I know, they are not these two etymologies. They're separate ones. They're not coming from the same source. And in Zoroastrianism, it's usually used to describe this consciousness. This Deen was identified with the three type of actions by mind, actions by word, and actions by hands. So after the death, this three witnesses will testify against you. And this witnesses paradigm. You can even see it in the Gnostic tradition, or at least what we can find in Nag Hammadi, because Gnostic is an umbrella term. Maybe at some Persian document, and I'm talking about the Apocalypse of Paul, where the Paul is transcending through this higher realms and getting up, being not caught, but ended up being in this throne room when this demiurgic figure presented and questioning him. And these witnesses appear there, like the some sort of a, I don't know how to describe this kind of weird idea that these deeds of yours, the words of yours, and the mind of yours, they would be personified in some sort of a spirits who are gonna testify against you before this demiurge, before this judging figure, which is called Old Man in this particular document. And it's, well, Manichaeans use it for the Adonai, for this Old Testament judgeful, wrathful deity. They call him Old Man. And yeah, and the similar you can find, I think, in the Quran. But what you see is some sort of a normative sense to it. That's why it became the controversial. That as Islam is a misogynistic religion, the one testimony of the man equal to the four testimony of the woman. And what I think, what actually happening, it just heavily mistranslated when it comes to this particular narratives about the what, like, from common perspective is seen as some sort of a normative indication, like if a believing woman comes to you, there must be four witnesses to it, and this is usually taken as what is called mubakhala in Islam, where the two people curse each other when it comes to the specific dispute. And this curse held this divine significance in a sense. If you're actually lying in the dispute, this curse will later on will testify against you in the afterlife. And that's why actually they're cursing each other. So I don't know, because I'm not proficient enough, but from what I read in this particular surah, it's almost like every normative stances in the Quran were mistranslated from the general descriptive ones, when it was just simply a description what will happen before this judgment, before this judge figure. Basically, it's very similar to this particular Pauline tradition, but this judge figure just taken away as like the real judge, like this is how this particular procedure in the real life, in the Sharia, must be applied. And yeah, it's, what else? Just try to, like, I'm just looking to my scribbles for a second.
Well, here, maybe we can go to a comment here in the meantime. Revelation of Paul. Oh, thanks so much, Jason, for your comment. And fan fiction for 2 Corinthians 12:2-4, which I think, is that where he says he knows a guy that went to the third heaven? I think that's what we're talking about here.
I'm not proficient in the Pauline epistles, but yeah, what, like,
here, I'll look it up.
You can take it as a fan fiction, but to be honest, the Pauline epistles is a mess. It's just pile
Yeah.
of them, most
Well, look,
probably different authors doing this stuff.
yeah. So Jason says yes, that's it. So let's see, 12, 2 through 4. Two through four. Oh, I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know that this man, whether in the body or a part of the. Am I repeating the same line? And I know that whether in this body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows. What? Was caught. That's weird that it repeats the same line. I'm not
What is this,
mistaken.
Corinthians?
Yeah. Okay. So I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know that this man, whether out of the body, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, but God knows, was caught up to paradise and heard inexpressible things, things that no one is permitted to tell. Or at least that's the NIV.
Mm,
But
but the whole tradition is most likely Vedic one. It's not. It comes from this kind of Indo-Aryan influence here, right? Because
mhm,
they probably influenced by this shamanistic type of rituals when you're just
yeah,
drinking specific stuff and you're witnessing some
yeah.
sort of this visionary experience. But
It's like the whole like Vedic influence. It just occurs to me. You know how like in Hinduism, it's kind of complicated where like there's so many of this and they like to give numbers and they do this numbered things, right? And
yeah, but
in
Hinduism,
Gnosticism, they do the same thing. So I've never
yeah,
thought that there was a connection between the two, but maybe
yeah,
there
but
is.
it's a, I would say, big misnomer because Hinduism, in that sense, it's like the Gnosis umbrella term. It's just Christian came up with this idea, like, let's call all
Yeah,
of this weird stuff in India Hinduism. But when
yeah.
it
There's a
comes to
lot of parallels, aren't they? That the the people who think it's heresy put it all under an umbrella. I don't know.
yeah,
That's
but
kind of interesting.
Hinduism itself is just, I would say, thousands and thousands of religions. Just it's not.
Mm-hmm.
India itself is remained very, not tribal, but decentralized when it comes to the religious tradition and the upheld importance. Like every tradition have their own pantheon,
Mm-hmm.
which from my perspective is good when there's like because it's not allowed the India to be centralized, and in a way it was centralized in the Christianity. And yeah, and India or Hind itself is just country which never waged offensive warfare, and usually dualistic ideologies, they can easily be weaponized by the political factor, that you just say, oh well, we're on the we, we are on the side of light, our enemies are on the side of darkness. So it's the offensive warfare is justified, and it was there in Manichaeism too. For the viewers may not know, but the money was in court within Sassanid administration. It wasn't like this kind of peaceful monkhoods, like something like that,
Mm-hmm.
or completely separated from the politics. And Shapur, who was The Shah at the day, he was almost Alexander the Great of the Persia, like conquering everyone. There is the famous stela, or like, I don't know, some sort of a sculpture or bas-relief on, I don't know, I don't remember where, but where this kind of Roman emperor bending down the knee towards the Shapur. So yeah, but what I wanted to say, like in the Hinduism, it's much more complicated, but it's similar to this, more likely the early Buddhism schools in the more western parts of India bordering the Iran. And that's why, for example, we do find in sculpture that there's a famous, this kind of Greco-Buddhist type of art, which was established after the Alexander the Great conquered the kind of eastern parts, the Persia, and established the Seleucid Empire. And this Seleucid Empire art, it's a weird, I would say, the combination of Zoroastrianism and Buddhism, where oftenly Buddha portrayed with the Zoroastrian attributes, or at least Greco-Roman attributes, where there's Buddha sitting in the sculpture, and back at him there's the Hercules figure, or Buddha sitting and there's the fiery altar on the portrayal, like behind him or beneath him. So yeah, and that was the point, for example, in our scholarship, that when you bring up this idea of Buddhist influence on Islam, you would like, what the hell are you even on about? Islam is the most legalistic religion, while else the Buddhism is like abandon everything. But what was actually found in this, in the Western Rite Buddhism, right, in this Western parts of China and what is now Afghanistan, Turkmenistan. That's why, for example, there was a Buddhist statues in Afghanistan, which was blown up by the Taliban. What they found, that it wasn't like this kind of abandoned policy Buddhism. In the sutras, they found out that actually Buddha prescribed to be active in the politics. That this is part of the dharma, part of this divine law. And well, it's pretty much the same with the Manichaeism, I guess, because Manichaean, even like temples which we can find in China today, they're like, you can distinguish them from the Buddhist one. And yeah, but we were discussing this visionary tradition, but why it's Vedic? Because the whole even idea of this procession throughout this Chinvad bridge, it stems from the Vedic idea that there was some sort of a breach going on, and there is this heavenly guards who are gonna judge you, and if you were a bad person, you're gonna thrown out through the breaches. It's very popular in the Hindu tradition, and but you can easily combine these two tradition into one, or at least try to parallel, how is it nowadays called, perennialism, right? Perennialize them into one, and like exactly what the Mani did from my viewpoint, that he tried to combine two myths together, and this Yahweh figure in the Old Testament just simply became this one of the judges god in the Hinduism, like Yama, or Mithra, or Sraosh in the Zoroastrian tradition. And of course there is the higher god, right? And almost every Hindu school, that's the part of the belief that there's this some sort of higher Brahman, which is almost like this kind of soul sea from which particular souls intrude into this realm, and the actual goal, at least in the yogic tradition, is to break up this this attachment of the soul into what is called and this attachment called ahamkara in Hinduism, into this material realm. At least in yogic tradition, I'm speaking from the Natha Sampradaya tradition, because I myself watching one of the gurus or established guru in this particular tradition, and he happened to be Russian, but he fled away to India in 19th or something, and from there he is popularizing this belief. But what he's saying is very similar to the Gnosticism in a sense. But yeah, to return to my scribbles, for example, in the Quran, I guess I'm just gonna share the screen because it would be more proficient. Just 1 second. I hope it shares the screen. So as you can see, there's sometimes this particular particle translated as imperative one for no reason, because fa as the connective particle, it uses is the connection between the verses, or either as a start of the conditional sentences. But here it connects this particular sentence with the previous one. And usually in translation, they actually translated not don't swear, but swear, as some sort of imperative. That's that's like the completely opposite understanding of the verse. Mm-hmm. One person can read and swear by the fallen stars, but another person can read it as don't swear, because fa la can be translated this way. But as far as I know, this problem comes from the specific reading of the Quran, what is called the qira'at, the recitation, because in one of the recitations, here's my comparison, it is not fala, actually, it's fal. And if we just remove this alif, one of the alif, like here, for example, we just remove alif, this particle will become imperative one, la'aksim. So I think the whole controversy to begin with starts with a different tradition, and this is to the overall understanding that this kind of idea that all recitation is similar, they do not change the meaning. It's such a load of crap when you hear this, because that's utterly changes the meaning, completely opposite meaning. Swear by the fallen stars, don't swear by the fallen stars, opposite. You can't say that the meaning is not changed, it's just stupid. But yeah, and this is one of the occurrences of the swearing by the inanimate objects, right? But I read it differently. For example, usually you would translate this particular verse as a positive one. So call to the name of your mighty Lord. But this particular word, Rob or Robbuka, which translated as the Lord, it doesn't necessarily indicate this higher God. Like it can be used for the people as the Lord, like it's used for the Firaun, what is called the Pharaoh in the Quran. So it can be translated as the positive imperative, like and please call to the name of your mighty Lord, the good one. Or it can be translated, for example, as some sort of irony. So go on, call to the name of your Lord, the mighty one. The Quran in that sense is so ambiguous when it comes to this skeletal textual structure, because we basically don't have anything in terms of the diacriticals. And I'm just going to show one of the beautiful sites, which is called the Corpus Coranicum, where you can just basically go, put up the specific surah and verse, and it will give you the concordance of the different manuscripts. And this particular manuscript, as you can see, Al-Fustat, it's in the Kufi script, but which is already some sort of a modernized version of what is called Hijazi script. But the name is a big misnomer, because we already like preconceived that Quran appears in the Hijaz, and that's why they used like the specific title for the oldest scripts we have, basically like the most archaic one. And the Kufi is as I can tell, is like this first attempt to modernize the script so it became much more readable. So it's old, but it's not as old as, for example, as Sana'a manuscript, this very controversial one, or Sana'a palimpsest, where there's two layers of the text, and the text on the background was like stripped away, and the new text was written about the old one. But it's still pretty much old comparing to the later Kufi tradition, where this, okay, I would try, is this Sana'a? Just to pinpoint the differences, but unfortunately it's not loading properly. But as you can see, this is basically the oldest one we have. It's even was carbon dated, and this is the range which it gives, from 606 to 649. Pretty much the lifetime of the Muhammad, at least from this kind of general Abbasid tradition. And you can see Hijazi, because Hijazi is more cursive one. And as you can see, there is the doting, and that's such a big misconception about the idea that there is no doting in the early manuscript. There is doting, but it plays chaotically most of the time. It's not consistent. Like it's almost like the scribe doing the vowelization for himself to understand the text. It wasn't supposed to be passed down to much broader audience. Most likely could be used in local monasteries, right, or masjids or mosques. I don't know how to call the early religious sites in Islam. But there is no diacriticals, like they're absolutely absent, as you can see. All these lines are actually dots. It was some sort of a convention back in the day to use it in this way. But this is the transcription, for example, from. I'm just show it to testify what I'm trying to say, that there's different colors, as you can see, the pinky one, the green one, blue one, and they stand for the different type of changes which differentiate this particular manuscript from what we have today as the Quran. And yellow stands for the missing characters, blue for the added characters, and so on, or even worse, erased ones. So you can see there's a lot of stuff, like Aleph is erased, for example. Here the character was missing. Some things were added. So what I tried to say that it's not that clear at all when it comes to the Quranic text, and you can come up with a different definition. Most problem appear with the alephs, where the particular alephs were added later on, and I think it was done deliberately to confuse the reader how to distinguish the noun from the verb, because usually what you see in the Arabic when aleph added, it's the indicator of the noun, because there's specific like grammatical forms in Arabic where the addition of aleph into the skeletal text gives the impression of the noun instead of the verb. And well, how it's not changing the meaning, I will ask. Like, if you read something as being a verb, and other reader will read it as the noun, like it's just different sentences. So yeah, and I just came up with the later on. For example, here. Usually you will see I'm just trying to find the alephs in like the classical traditional translation or text of the Quran we have. So it wouldn't be hafadata, it would be hafidata. Same with the rafa'ata, would be read as the rafiyata, changing the meaning completely, because traditionally it is translated as something which elevates and something which brings the law. And this ta marbuta is another layer of problem, because there's no distinctive mark, there's no this upper two dots in the original text. So this ta marbuta can be read as the ta marbuta, and ta marbuta usually is identifying mark of the noun in Arabic, of the feminine noun. But if we strip away the dots, these two upper dots, it will become the verb with a masculine pronoun. Hafadahu, he, and it's a rough literal translation, he bring him to the lowest point. But if we translate it as the noun, hafadata, it will become some sort of a depreciation, or I don't know, inclination or something like that. So that's overall the problematic of the text we have. Because if you're really honest and begin with a text, you can come up with so much different conclusions. But yeah, it's just ridiculous how it's presented in the overall to the overall public, that Qira'ats doesn't change anything. Of course it changed everything. What are you on about? Like, who you want to, like, it's such an evident lie. Like, nobody with at least, I don't know, 3 months education in Arabic would buy the stuff. Like, it's just for the like the English audience, which doesn't know anything about the Arabic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure the apologetic would be, well, this is, if it's variant, then it's not the Quran.
Yeah, that's would be like, I think that the common apologetic would be, we have the 7 qira'ats, and who is not following the 7 qira'ats as a kafir. or something like that, and which is not even present in this so-called Sunnah or the Hadith tradition. There's no Hadith which states that, oh, you must follow the 7 qira'ats or you're kafir. It comes from the fiqh, much more later fiqh, often usually associated with the Ottomans, or it's like 17th century. So it's quite a big time leap, I would say, from 6 to 17. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is kind of wild with all the variant ways that you can take things, and
Yeah, you can completely.
can mean the opposite.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the King James version, where in James, right, the book of James, there's a portion where it's only the King James version that renders a certain passage. If I were to claim to be a god, I would be a thief. I think that's it. But I have I have it the other way around. King James says, even though I claim to be a god, I am not a thief. I'm going to need to look it up. But all the other versions say, if I were to claim to be a god, I would be a thief, right? It's exactly the, or I mean, it's
not
different.
Yeah, but it's different reading, obviously. But yeah, like, it's weird that King James version rendered Yahweh as the Lord. It doesn't transliterate as the Yahweh, just simply the Lord. And in Syriac tradition, it's not that clear whether because what they do in the Peshitta translations, I mean in English Peshitta translation, they rendered the Mar Yah as and Mar stands for the Lord in Aramaic. Even in Arabic, the Mar or Imru is some sort of venerate title. They translate it as Mar, and the Yah is this kind of a first letter of the Yahweh, like Lord Yahweh. It can easily be translated as my Lord, and this kind of Yah preposition would indicate that it goes to yourself. It's the first person. And it's not even clear in the Syriac, but in Arabic, you won't find any Yahweh at all. It's just either Rob or Allah. And as I shown, even this Rob, you can translate it not. It's more like in the Pauline epistle. There's a Theos, it's kind of God, and there's a Kurios, the Lord. And that's why Paul distinguishes our God the Father and our Lord Jesus, or Isu, as it in Marcionite reconstruction. So, like it's so like obviously deceptive when they try to sell it this particular way. But I guess for each to their own. Like it's just ridiculous.
Yep, for sure. And here we have Jason again. Does Gnosticron have any recommendations for a good English translation with scholarly commentary? Yeah, that's what I thought you would say.
I guess I like met one which like way better than others, and I'm just gonna pull out because it's in my browser. Just 1 second. Which I even sometimes use because it's correct in the way the author construct the grammatical sentences. It's maybe not correct in terms of the meaning, in terms of semantic, because usually semantics comes from the Abbasid sources, but it's the, oh, god damn, it just disappeared. Ali Bakhtiyari Nejat translation. Ali Bakhtiyari Nejat. I can pull out the name in the StreamYard. I don't know. Like this. Oh, comments here. It's the private chat, but I cannot. 1 second. I'm just gonna Google it and show into my screen. Ali. I'm sure there is some sort of a title or Bakhtiyari Nejat Quran. No, unfortunately, it's only on Islam Awakened, but yeah. I'm just 1 second, please. Share screen. Is it shared? I don't know.
There we go.
This is amazing site because it's basically a compilation of the different tafsiris you have, like modern ones. It's a lot of them, as you can see. Like it's each one of them stands from like different source. It's a Muhammad Assad translation, like the common one, Pickthall, which like the first proposal in the Google. But what
That's wild. And these are all of the same verse.
Yeah. Sure.
But they're not the same verse, are they? And if the dying person and if the deceased, and if he is one of those who are made near.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if he be of the brought nigh?
Brought near, yeah.
Then if he is one of the honored. How about that?
Yeah, you can skip this kind of, because when it comes to some sort of additions, it's always gonna be in brackets. So
yeah, well, the next one down doesn't have any brackets. They read God in there.
They don't care. Yeah, but this is the most literal which I found, like this Ali Bakhtiyari. But yeah, you can see it, and this is as far as now, Quranist community made their own translation. That's monotheist group. So this Quran only dudes came up with their own. Maududi is the Salafi, as far as I know. If you want something like there is no miracles in the Quran, you read Muhammad Assad. He's very popular among this Quran only or Ahmadiyya community, which are like super rational. Everything must be according to the natural law.
Oh yeah,
this kind of stuff. Miracles in the Quran, and as you can see, like the dudes are just translating as they want. Sometimes even not adding the brackets, and you can like put this up, and there's gonna be a different. Like it's very useful stuff. Just using it. It's for the purpose of the transliteration. There's first and foremost transliteration, and like for example, and this is the main page, so it's easy to navigate. Like Surah 1, you just take out the specific verse. Like it's very easy, and it also have the literal translation, but sometimes even this Shehnaz Sheikh translation is not that literal. It's sometimes there's like this kind of I was intoxication by the Abbasid like classical translation, but I would personally recommend this one as the most like honest among the Sunni ones. But when it comes to the semantics and the grammatical structure, even in this one, you would see some sort of a mistranslation when it comes to the conditional sentences. But when it comes to the semantics, you won't find anything in English, like any scholarly work. Unfortunately, they would sometimes just mistranslate stuff, and that's just the sad state of affairs of the traditional translation, because you either follow the tradition or kicked off as a kafir or as a zindiq or something. And,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
The last verse that we looked up was a bit more similar to each other on the previous one. You noticed that?
Yeah, but usually this kind of discrepancies are when there is a weird grammatical structure, like unusual in Arabic, or when it comes to the words which appears once, and there is like the scope of guessing appears, because this scope of guessing is exactly what we have in the classical translations from Arabic, and early ones, Abbasid ones, because it's not that univocal as you can as they present it, like I would say. So yeah, I would recover. Like, I hope I answered the question about that.
Yeah, and even in the New Testament, there are some words like that.
Yeah, sure.
Only used once.
It's only, I think, David Litva who points this kind of stuff out. That it's not that clear as it's presented to be clear, and this is basically what we have, right? And
and it could be, or things that could be read multiple ways because of Greek is quirky like that.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
And sometimes it's by intent to be read multiple ways.
Yeah, you read specific theology into the text.
Yeah.
Well, similar to that stuff, where as you saw, there's like multiple ways of reading. For example, even in Surah, what I translate now, Waqiya, as the word appears, what is khulqum, and usually translated as the neck or throat, and that's, for example, there's like Turkish delight in Arabic called rahatul khulqum, like some sort of a good stuff for the throat, like pleasant stuff for the neck. And this khulqum, it's the only word in Arabic with this kind of a weird form, when this added to the root base. Its root base would be khalaqa, to divide, to peel off, and khulqum would be the verbal noun. You add this specific suffix, and the verb became the noun in that case. But well, it's the only word in Arabic with this specific structure, and that gives you like some sort of doubts. Either it's the Arabic one, or just straight away some sort of borrowing from other languages. I tried to find something, but I haven't been able to. But how they make this assumption? Well, khalaqa means to peel off, often used to denounce like to shave, and why is the throat? Well, because you are when you shave, you use some sort of knife or or razor, and when you cut off or do the sacrificial stuff, you cut off the throat of the animal. So here's the analogy, basically, and that's why it means the throat. And it's not that like I would say it's a far-fetched analogy. It's like you need to do like 2 steps basically to apply that. And many of the words in the Quran, like weird one, which appears once. That's why this khur'ain is the problem, because used in this context like only like 4 times or something, and not that popular word in the text. And yeah, Hur is usually taken as the white one because it's the Arabic semantics here, which is similar to Aramaic. And in Aramaic, Hur means white. That's why Luxemburg came up with this conclusion. But many other scholars pick up the idea that Hur is the borrowing from the Persian, from the Middle Persian, from Hurusht, meaning the beautiful. And that's why I was so convinced that we are dealing with some Manichaean stuff. And most of the Manichaean scripture written in Middle Persian. And yeah, it's deceit. It's deceit of the traditional translation. They read the theology into the text. They do not translate it literally at all. When you see the Salafi or Ashari or like 12 Shia babbling about like, oh, we are the literalists, it's all hoax. It's all a hoax. When it comes to the points where the literal text goes against their own specific theology, they all go into the metaphors, into the allegories. That's why, for example, another good word would be shah or shay in Arabic, which translates as a thing, something in Arabic. And when it come up to the more libertine theologies like Mu'tazila, when they actually defend the notion of the human free will, this particular verbal form of the shah, translated as the created, or how God appointed something. Like, for example, mashallah, we often hear this from the Muslim speakers. And the libertines will translate it, how beautiful what the God created. But more like what is called Jabariya, the more deterministic, the more like occasionalistic philosophy schools within the Muslim tradition, like Asharis, for example, they translate the Shah as the will. They identify it with the notion of irada, with the notion of will in Arabic. And mashallah would become how beautiful what the God willed. And that's the different sense. And yeah, and the famous phrase another, inshallah, for example, if the God wills, I will do something. And in the libertine theologies, it would be if the God like make that or pre-exist, not the pre-existed, if the God, basically what they mean, if there's not gonna be like the judgment day, like if there's not gonna be judgment day tomorrow, I will do this and this. And well, that's the different readings. It's because it's different philosophies, and they read a specific theology into the text because it's inevitable in that sense. And I think I myself think that the libertine one is the more, it makes much more sense, because what can you came up with like from the noun thing? How you can derive verb from the noun? What it would be? Either it will be the existence, because something is something which exists, or it will be in the something to make, or I don't know. I think that it's more probable analogy in that sense than the will. But it's more a philosophical problem, like the famous philosopher Heidegger said, why why there is a something rather than nothing, but and there's a layer of philosophy behind the text, and you need to understand that when you read this traditional translation, there's always gonna be philosophy behind.
Mhm.
Salafi translation would translate literally the parts of God because this is their dogmas. Ashari would translate this particular word in terms of more deterministic notion that God willed it. Like if God will, He will like strip you away from the right path. Like it's all like more or less this kind of notion of, how is it called in the Christian schools? Not the arbitrariness of God, but I hope you understand my take. That
Are we talking about like open theology?
yes, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think there's some sort of a specific term for this, for this specific theology, like Calvinists would adhere to this.
So kind of the opposite of open theology would be double predestination.
Yes, something like that, right? So what I try to say, that always be aware if you're like reading the Quran from the English sources. So otherwise you need to study Arabic and read it in Arabic, and that's pain in the ass for the most of the people, especially non-Muslim audience. Like, why the hell I need to learn the Arabic?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how like the King James version, they made that, because really Trinitarianism doesn't really come through that powerfully when you're reading the Bible. So they needed to change that and add Trinitarianism to it. And then so we have like the Jonin comma, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, exactly.
And stronger Christology, right? They need Jesus to be undeniably God.
Yeah.
Um,
Or, for example, Christians versus Christians, where the specific letter were changed in order to give another pronunciation. So originally it was the I'm not familiar with the Greek alphabet, but originally the pronunciation was with the E sound, but later on they would just remove it and part of the letter, so it became Iota, and that would be the I sound. So Christians would not become good, like from good ones, they will become the messianist, basically Christians, the adherents of the Messiah.
Yeah. Well, I've heard from Dr. Price that they'd be pronounced the same, whether it's spelled Christians or Christians.
No. I'm sure it's not the same, because I've seen the. I was reading some the material where the manuscript is presented, and it's surely not. Surely. But is it eta? Yes, eta would be changed to the iota. So, yeah, no, it would be pronounced different. The first reading would be Christians, the second would be Christians, and Christian would come from the Christos, meaning the good one. And this Christos is used in the Greek extensively in like colloquial ancient Greek materials, without the meaning the messianist. But Christian will come from Christus, not from the Christos. So yeah, it would be different. Different meaning applied to this. That's why they removed that. That was the whole point. But I don't know about this kind of similar stuff in the Quran, but as far as I know, there is some discrepancies. But in terms of Ali, for example, as I presented, they would just remove later on, there'll be this modernization of these Quranic materials. And often it's ascribed to the Yusuf al-Hajjaj, who became almost like an antichrist in Abbasid tradition, that he established this some sort of a, I don't know, symposium, or like how to call it, the specific aggregation of the scholars, and they would do this, they would produce basically new copy. This new generation of copyists would produce new manuscripts with the alifs added. And this alifs, they change the meaning, obviously, from verb to noun. And but I think that all the story about Yusuf al-Hajjaj being the bad guy is just Abbasid propaganda, mostly, because he had tied with the Manichaeans, and all the Abbasid history starts with a anti-Manichaean propaganda, what I called, when the main opponent, it's like in the early Christianity where the main opponent were Gnostics. The main opponent in the early history of Islam would be Zindiqs, which early on stood for the Manichaeans. So there would be the all like type of literature of refutations of the Zindiqs, Rad ala Zanadika, what is called. Different authors would, it's like to make sure if you're a good author, you must have something like that in your like package. Like every prominent Orthodox Mu'tazila or later on Ash'ari scholar would have something like that, refutation of the Manichaees. And I think the history repeated itself in terms of Islam. It's just the same thing. Originally more inclined towards the Gnosticism, but later on this Gnosticism were simply Judaized or rehashed. That's why you have all these weird stories that, there was actually verses in the Quran which prescribes the stoning, the famous stoning verses, but it was removed, and the only information you can get it from the Hadith, obviously. And it's just, I'm just 99% sure that it was made up in order to facilitate specific ritual rite. In that stance, stoning, which was the case for the Orthodox Judaism, and as far as I know, still the case. So it's if you are really following the Mosaic law, you should stone this whore who who betrayed his husband.
Yeah, and then there's the bit about the Mar, like a temporary marriage.
Muta, yeah.
Oh yeah, muta. And Mar is like the payment for it, right? Is like the
Mahar,
what do you call it?
yeah. It's interesting that this word is just straight away transliteration from Persian mihr, the mithra in Middle Persian, and which is the contract, right? In the Persian, like it's a straight away translation, literal translation. But muta, it's another big pain in the ass, because it's not that clear that muta is prohibited in the Quranic text at all.
Well, in fact, they say that it's not, but it's been abrogated, they say, in the Hadith.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a strange thing, that Hadith can abrogate the Quran.
Well, it's not strange when you are Sunni, because it's basically that was the whole project of I would say the Ash'aris, more or less, because Hanbalis, they were always adherent to the Hadith, but they were like it was just the one of the little sects among the thousands back at the day. It wasn't like the prominent school. There was probably thousands of this madhabs, this specific not theological, but legalistic schools. And Ash'aris, they just pick up this idea, especially the Shafi'i, Muhammad ibn Idris, who was the prominent to propagate this idea that the Sunnah is able to abrogate the the Quran, because he held this distinction between Wahy Matlu, what is called the written revelation, and Wahy Ghair Matlu, non-written revelation. In that case, non-written revelation would be Sunnah. Even though, I mean, the whole point of the oral tradition is to be oral. If it's written, it's no longer oral tradition, because hadith is the written documents. It's not passed down oral. But in their conception, it was equivocated, this hadith traditions with the sunnah. And if there is a hadith, there is even the famous phrase of the Shafi: if there is a sound hadith or the sahih hadith, then it is my religion, basically. And that's the theological motto of this Shafi madhab, which in my opinion back at the day wasn't just simply legalistic practices. It was connected with a specific theology, definitely. It's later on was rehashed during the Ottoman time, because they needed to centralize Islam, to bring up this all different school together and say, like, guys, we're the same. We're under one umbrella term. But back at the day, they were killing each other. For example, Imam Malik, the founder of the Malikiya madhab, which is one of the fourth Orthodox, he was beaten by the Shafis, and Shafi himself was beaten to death by Malikis, because there was theological difference. Obviously, it's not simply the legalistic practices they would disagree upon. And same with Bukhari, Imam Bukhari, who was one of the compilers of the Sahih al-Bukhari, right? Oh, you must adhere to the Sahih al-Bukhari if you're Sunni, the most Sahih books after the Quran. He was beaten to death by the Hanbalis because he didn't profess their beliefs. Because Hanbalis, they believe that God actually speaks Arabic. That's basically the whole point of the Hanbali school, that the God speaks Arabic. And there is no distinction between the written Arabic and what God speaks. And that was the problem for this more orthodox Asharis, who distinguish this Kalamullah, the word of God, into two types. The almost like this kind of noetic words, like, I don't know, some sort of Akashic record, and written form, which can be transcribed from this or translated from this Akashic record by the prophets, depending on their environment. Like, because, well, there was a Hebrew prophets to begin with, who didn't spoke Arabic, but from the Hanbali standpoint, it's always like basically what we have today is the Torah. It's all fake. Originally, it was all in Arabic. That's their theology. And and he was beaten to death by the Hanbalis because he upheld the second position, that there is some sort of Akashic record. And why he was beaten? Because the whole Hadithi tradition, or Ahlul Hadith, what they call people of the Hadith, it was more inclined toward the Hanbalis. It was more Hanbali thing to do this stuff, like all this Qala Rasulullah, like Muhammad says so, and there is this isnad, the chains, or how is it, chain of transmission, right? It was all mostly done by the Hanbalis, and they were like specialists in that field. And if you want to basically go through the educational system, it wasn't institutionalized during like the 9th century, this madrasa. But otherwise, if you want to have specific the certificate that you're like the mullah, you're established mullah. You need to go through the learning process, through this Hanbali school, and well, you know how it's in the society when you're starting making like this kind of a discord in the community when you upheld different belief, and he most probably was basically killed by the Hanbali. So all of the stuff that there was like a peaceful Islam early on, just such a nonsense. And this is just basically what we have, this 5 madhab, 5 major ones. Most probably there was thousands of them, if not 10,000s. Because what do you need to do actually to say, well, I am the true faqih, I am the true jurist, follow me? And that's how the schools emerged, most probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. All right. Do we want to leave it there, or was there anything else you wanted to mention?
Yeah, sure. I think we're like discussed. I hope I'm gonna finish the translation next or weeks after, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
publish it on my personal site.
Yeah. It'll be interesting what we come up with that. That
Yeah,
like an honest, unbiased translation.
yeah, you can compare it basically. We
Mhm.
can make a stream of comparison. The classical one we can take up from the Quran.com, like the first link in the Google, and my one. Heck, there would be a difference, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
And yeah, everybody watching, thank you so much for watching till the end here. And
Yeah.
yeah, have a great day, everybody.
Yeah.